Mario games have been known to be pretty consistent in terms of their quality, regardless of it being a mainline title or a spin-off. Even some of the more questionable titles can still be enjoyed to a degree by fans of the franchise. It's genuinely impressive how these games have hardly seen any drastic dip in overall quality since the 1980s. The worst it's gotten, at least in recent times, is probably the Wii U era, but even then we still got good games like Super Mario 3D World, Mario Kart 8, and Super Mario Maker. Some will say the Year of Luigi was the quote-unquote darkest age for a specific time period, though I'm still on the copium that it wasn't the main reason Nintendo's finances got rolled that year. Either way, Mario rarely disappoints. And that could be in part because some of Mario's games that Nintendo never thought were good enough to release stayed in the vault in hopes of keeping Mario's reputation in good quality. In theory, of course. So what are some of these games that were being developed behind the scenes but were never properly released into the market? Well, there was a decent bit of them actually. Some I'm sure you probably heard of at least once or twice, while others are obscure enough to the point where I've never really seen them mentioned at all on social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, or even YouTube. So without further ado, here's the canceled Mario games to date. One of the more obscure entries is Mario's Mission to Earth, an SNES game that would play similarly to Mario is Missing and Mario's Time Machine. A video game composer Mark Knight, shout out to other Marks, is the only living proof of the game actually existing. It was posted on his old webpage he worked on it. Though this specific webpage doesn't exist, I tried clicking on it and said the server couldn't be reached. So his list of works eventually became viewable on a Kickstarter campaign he collabed with that released a documentary about Commodore computers back in 2018. Though a Mario game with even more mystery behind it is Mario's Castle, a game that was planned to be released on the canceled Project Atlantis system. A portable system meant to serve as a new kind of Game Boy, but was ultimately upstaged by the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advanced. Mario's Castle was set to be a launch title for this system, though since the system never came out, the only proper mention of Mario's Castle was from an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly claiming Nintendo of Japan was working on the game and intended it to be a launch title. Based off the title alone, I can only assume the game would be some kind of exploring game inside Mario's Castle, kind of like Luigi's Mansion without the ghosts or something. Crockpot theory, go burr, I guess. In 1994, Nintendo put a patent for a device that could create basic games for the SNES, with said program being called Mario Factory. However, outside of this one screenshot, the information on this game actually being a proper thing is borderline non-existent. Though, to add another crackpot theory into the mix, this may have been used for the early stepping stones for Super Mario Maker on the Wii U, but there's no real way of knowing. Next up is Mario Takes America. This was conceptualized by a development team in Toronto, Canada named SIGM. They approached Phillips Media about making a Mario game that would be on the more educational side. Mario would travel from New York City all across to the west coast of Hollywood and eventually star in his own movie once he got there. Throughout his journey, Mario would get to ride in different vehicles like trucks, trains, and even helicopters. A real-life footage was filmed for the game too, meant to be used as backgrounds for the game, I think, going for a pseudo-realism kind of look. The game even had early footage shown at a New York CDI conference and the Consumer Electronics Show. Problem was, it was very tough for those real-life backgrounds to work well on the Phillips CDI, with progress on the game getting worse over time. Phillips decided to can the project with SIGM, or KIGM, I'm not sure how to exactly pronounce it, going bankrupt not too long after. One of the few pieces of media that physically acknowledged the game's existence was a United Kingdom CDI article highlighting how Mario would be making his CDI debut, writing about the general premise of the game and giving a quick shout out to Hotel Mario's upcoming debut. Maybe if Mario Takes America decided to use the same genius art style that Hotel Mario went for with its cutscenes, it could have worked.
Looks are deceiving when Koopas are involved.
This wasn't the only Mario Phillips CDI game that never properly hit store shelves. Super Mario's Wacky Worlds was meant to serve as a follow-up to the cult classic Super Mario World, which seemed to take a similar approach to Mario Takes America, where Mario would be traveling to real-life inspired locations like Egypt and Greece. The game never finished completion since the Phillips CDI was an overall failure as a console, but 3 prototypes of the game were made, showcasing over 20 playable levels. No power-ups were usable, and some new Koopa enemy variants as well as a new walrus-looking enemy were used throughout. Some of the screenshots for the game actually made it look relatively decent in my opinion, though there's a high chance the sales would have not been great because of it being on the Phillips, so I can see why the project was canned. At least the concept of Mario traveling around the world wasn't scrapped and became later utilized very well in Super Mario Odyssey. They're still holding out hope for Odyssey 2 in 2025. Please, Miyamoto-sama. Next is the game Mario Land or Mario Adventure for the Virtual Boy. Although the Virtual Boy was a bit of a failure, at least this seems to be one of the few hardware failures even Nintendo seems to be okay making fun of. The game appeared to function as your typical 2D Mario side-scroller, with some levels taking inspiration from early Zelda dungeons and having an overhead view to them. This concept would eventually make it into games like Super Mario 3D Land and a few select levels. A tech demo was shown in 1995, and based on the obstacles Mario was dealing with, specifically this mustached thwomp thing, it leads me to believe the developers intended Wario to reprise his role as Mario's main obstacle, just like in Super Mario Land 2 for the Game Boy, with Mario Adventure serving as a sequel of sorts. Even though Wario having his own titles where he can shine more are great, it still would have been cool to see him oppose Mario directly again in a platformer title, even if it was for the Virtual Boy. The Virtual Boy also planned to have a Mario Kart game released, with the only known proof of its existence being from a German magazine called Big N that listed a bunch of cancelled Virtual Boy projects in the August 2000 issue. Probably wouldn't have been the best game in the world, but I think I'd take that over Elon Musk's Tesla Mario Kart idea. Thank God Nintendo shut that freak down. Imagine how many car accidents would have happened. Lots of pre-existing Mario games were planned to be ported to different systems, but never really made it all the way to. The arcade game Mario Bros. Had 3 different planned ports for Apple II, the Atari 8-bit computer, and Commodore 64. Super Mario Bros. Had 2 different attempts to get on the Commodore as well from developers Firebird and Orpheus Software. Firebird actually got approval, but production never got done for unknown reasons. On top of Mario Parties 1 and 2 having Nintendo's Dynamic Drive ports that never made it, or Disk Drive, whatever name floats your boat, I'd argue one of the weirdest attempted ports came from Super Mario Bros. 3. A company called ID Software made their own game called Dangerous Dave in copyright infringement back in the 90s for IBM PCs and used Mario 3's first level for the baseline. So the dev team decided to just lean more into the Mario 3 angle by making a Mario 3 port for PC. Though unsurprisingly, it was rejected by Nintendo since they're not too keen on direct PC ports. At least the dev team wasn't completely empty-handed in the end, further reworking the demo to fully make the game Commander Keen in Invasion of the Vorticons. Though I'd argue the most notable port in recent history was the Mario Kart Wii port for the Nvidia Shield. This port in particular was exclusive to China, apparently being the only game from the Wii era that was completed and ready to go on the Nvidia Shield. But because the developers stopped receiving feedback from the Chinese government for further approval, it was never allowed to be properly released. Which worked out, I guess, because by 2022, all Wii ports were completely unplayable on the Shield. Now, for one of the most notable games, which I think would have been really cool if it got made, was Super Mario 64 2. Super Mario 64 2 was a sequel planned for the original Mario 64, set to release on the Nintendo 64's Dynamic Drive. Problem was, the Dynamic Drive was a colossal commercial failure, arguably one of Nintendo's worst when it comes to hardware. So the game was cancelled pretty early into development, with no kind of gameplay ever being released to the public or leaked behind the scenes. All we really knew was it was going to be more co-op focused, where both Mario and Luigi could be playable at the same time. Yoshi was going to be in 2, but instead of just making a cameo like the first game, he'd be rideable. It does seem like a lot of these original plans were eventually implemented into future Mario titles though, like Luigi being playable in Super Mario 64 DS, or Yoshi being rideable for the first time in 3D in Super Mario Sunshine. Some believed the title was actually going to be called Super Mario 128 because of it being double the number of 64, but that was false. Though a tech demo of Mario 128 showing a bunch of Marios running around a sphere would be used as groundwork to help make games like Pikmin 1, Super Mario Galaxy, Metroid Prime, and Zelda Twilight Princess. Despite no gameplay for Super Mario 64 2 ever seeing the light of day, this still feels like one of those canned projects a lot of people know about solely off the fact that it's connected to the original Super Mario 64, which is a timeless classic. But at least with the power of technology, Mario fans have been able to create versions of Mario 64 that have been able to implement multiplayer with both Mario and Luigi models. It's clear Nintendo really wanted co-op to be a thing for this game. Even Space World 1995 footage for early versions of Mario 64 seemed to have Luigi playable for unfinished test areas, but they just didn't really have the proper technology to implement it into 3D yet. Even still, it would have been cool if a sequel like this was properly and officially made. To this day, I've never been a huge fan of the DS remake because of the wonky D-pad controls for a 3D game. At least it's got Luigi Poker though. Another small note about Mario 64 is the original game was also ported to the Nintendo DD. This version of the game was dumped online in 2014 with some notable differences, like Mario's moldable face at the start being replaced with a standard title screen, better sound, and longer load times for some reason. You'd think they would have gotten shorter if the intention was to show off the system's performance, but whatever. As well as a bug where the game completely shits the bed when trying to enter the Wiggler boss fight arena. Similarly to Mario Castle, a Mario game by developers Boss Game Studios tried pitching an idea to Nintendo of America in the 90s. Not much is known about the pitch outside of this single concept art of Mario running across some tiles, only for one of the tiles to randomly come to life and start walking towards Mario with an angry looking face, potentially being an enemy of some kind. Now, I'm sure Mario Paint is a title most Mario Mario fans have at least heard of in passing, and even if they haven't, they still probably unlocked or used the Mario Odyssey costumes that were taken from Mario Paint. Back in the late 1999 to early 2000s era, 4 Mario Paint games were made for the Nintendo DD, but were never released outside of Japan. The first was Mario Artist Paint Studio, where the gameplay was focused on a mixture of standard painting where you or 4 players total could paint a picture together, with several stock images that could be used for reference, like images of Banjo-Kazooie, Link, Zelda, and every Kanto Pokemon, just to name a few. You could also animate images in a flipbook format with the max frame rate capping at 35 frames. A mode where you could explore Mars, underwater, and a dinosaur area, and take pictures of said environments. Then a simple gallery where you can just go through everything you created. Plus, back in June 2020, a prototype version of the game was uploaded to YouTube by the user Luigi Blood, showcasing a fly-swatting type game, which followed a similar gameplay flow to the Nat Attack mode from the original Mario Paint. Mario Artist Talent Studio was much simpler, mainly serving as a custom character creator game that could be imported into other Mario Paint games for the DD. This was basically Mii's before Mii's became official, but I have doubts the concept of Mii's originated here. There's also this funny artwork of Mario with an afro connected to this game for whatever reason. I never knew how much I wanted to see something like this until now. Mario Artist Communication Kit just served as a way for players to upload their creations online via an R&D NetDD internet service, whose menus reminded me a lot of Super Smash Bros. Melee's stage select screen, with the 4th installment being Mario Artist Polygon Studio, where you can make 3D renders to paint. It's also got a couple WarioWare-esque minigames called Sound Bomber and Go-Go Pack, each having 3 difficulty tiers. Oddly enough, these weren't the only planned Mario Paint games. There were 4 others for the DD called Mario Paint Game Maker, Graphical Message Maker, Sound Maker, and Video Jockey, but were inevitably cancelled. Not gonna lie, I'm kinda shocked these were 4 separate releases and not just thrown into one big game. I couldn't find how much these games were being charged for initially, but hopefully it wasn't too much for the respective time period, because goddamn dude, it feels like these games just didn't have much bone to them. And I know these first 4 games weren't technically cancelled, rather just region-specific releases, but with the other 4 planned games being cancelled, on top of the system it was on being mostly lost to the sands of time, I figured they were still worth mentioning anyway. This next one wasn't totally cancelled, rather reworked into a brand new title. Super Mario RPG for the SNES was planned to have a sequel on the N64 called Super Mario RPG 2. However, since the original developers of the first game, Square, now known as Square Enix, was making their move to work on PlayStation titles more, the game's name had to be changed to Super Mario Adventure, then Mario Story, and eventually became the Paper Mario game we know and love today. Early logos of Super Mario RPG 2 came to light over the years, as well as concept art of the game resembling Super Mario World with a more picture book style, with the backgrounds akin to Yoshi's Story for the N64. Mario's art style would continue to evolve, but still look different from the final. At one point, he had eyes with pupils, as opposed to the simple black dotted eyes he's had in every Paper Mario game since official releases. Neponuts were also planned to be in the game, further adding to the game following a more Yoshi-ish theme. Some other screenshots came to light even later, showing the game looking much closer to being completed with development, with character designs, but still looking relatively unfinished overall. During the Nintendo DS era, a game designer by the name of Yute Saito pitched an idea for a game called Mario Motors, where players would be constructing car engines in different ways to determine how said engines would run, with the DS microphone having players blow into it to make the engine accelerate. However, that idea was scrapped because it was thought to be too tough on kids. Miyamoto apparently thought the overall concept of the game was cool, but the project just never really found its footing. Only a few screenshots for the game exist showing the inner workings of the different engines, and some pictures of an oiled up Mario next to an other white-haired mustache man, who presumably acts like the main guide for the game. Oddly enough, Super Paper Mario was supposedly planned to release simultaneously on both GameCube and Wii in 2006, similar to how Breath of the Wild did with the Wii U and Switch, though for seemingly unknown reasons, the game was pushed back to April 2007 for the Wii. Apparently, the GameCube version had Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Bowser all using the R button to use their special abilities to navigate through levels, as opposed to each of them having unique action commands in the final version. Also, Pixels used to be called Fairins that would have fairy abilities that worked the same way as a lot of the final ones do, like Throw and Cudgel. At one point during the Wii era, a Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix 2 was also planned to be worked on. Its existence became known via a leaked Nintendo spreadsheet that listed Wii games, some of which actually became real, like Super Mario Strikers 2, now known as Mario Strikers Strikers Charged, and Metroid Prime 3. But since DDR Mario 2 never actually came out, despite being on the spreadsheet, something iffy must have been going on during development that led to the project getting cancelled altogether. Mario has gotten tons of sports titles over the years: basketball, baseball, soccer, tennis, golf, and even Olympic events with our favorite Blue Man. However, as a self-proclaimed Haikyuu stan, it grinds my gears how a Mario volleyball game was never officially released. But Next Level Games, the same developers behind the Mario Strikers games, did try to make Super Mario Spikers, a volleyball wrestling hybrid game intended to release on the Wii. The original working title would be Mario Volleyball, and it was in development at the same time as Mario Strikers Charged. As this went on, Next Level wanted to implement wrestling into the game, with concept art of Mario in different wrestling uniforms being revealed. Yet none of his art seemed to depict how he would look playing volleyball. More concept art showcasing stages was also posted: a creepy looking mountain area, a general stadium, a volleyball court that looks like it's inside of a game show studio, an ocean arena that has thunderstorms, and a unique depiction of DK Island that wasn't really modeled like an arena or court yet. The closest thing we have to actual gameplay for Spikers are these test animations of Shy Guy, Yoshi, Waluigi, and Mario performing both wrestling and volleyball actions. That Spike from Waluigi looks fierce, by the way. Waluigi! Lester! Sorry, I don't know what came over me there. Unfortunately, Nintendo would end up axing the project due to the wrestling moves in particular going too far for Mario's family-friendly brand, so the game ceased production altogether in 2007. But at least the idea of Mario playing volleyball still lived on in smaller ways, like in specific Mario Party minigames and Mario Sports Mix, which released in 2011 in the US. Despite it being developed by Square Enix instead of Next Level, volleyball was still in there, so it's a win in my book. Another smaller project for the GameCube involving Mario characters playing football was also pitched by Retro Studios in the early 2000s. However, Nintendo wanted the game to just be a more realistic football game without Mario characters, eventually turning the names into NFL Retro Football and Retro Studios Football. But both that and the Mario version were cancelled entirely, supposedly because games like Madden were just too big at that point to compete with. Understandable, but also a bit unfortunate if true. On the topic of Retro Studios, these guys wanted to make a DS game with Boo as the main character. Perfect choice of an enemy, by the way. Boos have been my favorite since I became hyperfixated on Luigi. A former employee of Retro named Sammy Hall posted concept art of the game showing Boo's in a school setting of sorts, with King Boo acting as the headmaster. Apparently the reason the project was rejected was because Nintendo wanted Retro to focus on the other projects they were working on at the time, which I can only assume were the Metroid games that were released on the same time on the Wii and DS, and potentially Donkey Kong Country Returns. Mario's collaborations with the Rabbids have become quite well known in recent years, with Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle selling over 10 million copies worldwide as of June 2023, and its sequel, Sparks of Hope, selling around 3 million as of January 2024. Yet funny enough, Ubisoft Paris wanted to explore a crossover between these two worlds all the way back in 2010. Concept art for the pitch was made showing a group of rabbits kidnapping Bowser, with Mario chasing after them, seemingly making Bowser the damsel in distress this time instead of Peach, though the pitch never went much further since the game didn't exist. Plus, according to Ubisoft employee David Soliani, this 2010 pitch had nothing to do with the Mario Rabbids game's development and was its own separate game. Well, that just about covers every major canceled Mario game. We'll probably do a follow-up video or several on other canceled games from that overall universe of games in the future, like canceled DK games, Wario ones, or Yoshi ones. I just wanted this video to focus solely on ones Mario was set to physically appear in or have his title in the name of to make it less confusing. In my eyes, if they don't have that mushroom watermark connected to them in the Smash Bros games, then it's probably their own thing. I'm not lazy, I swear, please believe me. If you enjoyed this video, don't be a stranger to leaving a like down below and subscribing for more content like this in the future. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.